If you've seen our Russia episode, Team CIS are the Minecraft building team in charge of building their country, and they might have the most impressive resume in terms of amount completed. But a subset of CIS, Ukraine, decided to part from the team once Russia declared war on Ukraine 2 years ago in real life. Ukraine has made considerable progress, and in another video we talked about whether or not we should build areas as they are when real-world conflicts are happening there. My understanding is that most or all of Ukraine is being built by Ukraine in its pre-war fashion, and they've built a considerable amount. Here's Kyiv, their capital, the city's center. The center square you're seeing is called Maidan Nezalezhnosti. If I butchered that pronunciation, shoot me. Since Ukraine's independence in 1990, the square has been the location for all political rallies, whether they get violent or not. This thing has gone by so many names because it's endured through time as a physical location maintained by the civilizations that have risen and fallen around it. They called it Previsish 1,000 years ago, then Koizny Boloto, and then the Kreschatchitskaya Ploshad, then renamed the Soviet Square, then Kalinin Square. It just goes on forever. Since Ukraine became independent in 1990, the political protests here have been constant. One of the largest was in 2004 after a presidential election in which the protesters claimed election fraud. At the center of the square stands the Independence Monument, a victory column commemorating the country's independence, which they are defending physically to this very day. Team Ukraine have also built this substantial residential area in Kyiv named Pozniaky. It's a historic site that has typical recent Soviet residential units, but is sitting on land that was once a medieval village. Most of those old buildings were demolished in the 1980s. As Vladimir Lenin once said, "Let the past die. Kill it if you have to." Now on to some real shit. This is Pripyat, a beautifully forested huge area that Team Ukraine has built. But what's maybe only slightly noticeable in Minecraft is that something about this area is wrong. These buildings you see, as sparse as they are between the overgrown forests, are empty. Pripyat is a ghost town. Its apartments, restaurants, all of its buildings are rotten and decaying versions of their 1985 selves. That's because Pripyat was within the Chernobyl exclusion zone. In 1986, this town was evacuated, its citizens to never return as the perhaps slightly radioactive wildlife and nature retake the buildings, possessions, wear down the roads, and slowly re-assimilate the materials that make up Pripyat. But there's still some people here, an estimated 500 of mostly elderly who refused to leave their homes when the evacuation was called. It's estimated by some that Pripyat will take 20,000 years in order to be habitable again. However, radioactivity from the elephant's foot in that basement has died down to the point where you're not going to instantly die if you turn the corner of that hallway anymore, so maybe there's some hope for the surrounding area. You need a special permit to enter the exclusion zone, but it's a casual enough affair at this point that they offer guided tours that go into Pripyat and Chernobyl with groups of tourists showing everything. In terms of the wildlife retaking the area, it's been speculated that they're radioactive, and they've done lots of study on this. Animals in the area experienced radiation sickness and detrimental long-term health effects. And yes, the radiation affected animals at the genetic level. All of their lifespans are shorter. Mutations leading to disease and bodily breakdown are common. Even the tree frogs of Chernobyl are now all a different color in an attempt to protect themselves from the radiation. It's like Darwin from that first X-Men movie, trying to protect himself from Kevin Bacon, and it's also affecting animals coming into the area long after the radioactivity in the air has died down. Radioactivity permeated the soil, which goes into the plants, which gets eaten by the herbivores, who then get eaten by the carnivorous animals. We have traced radiation through the food chain all the way to carnivorous wolves, which has serious ramifications regarding the transportation of particulate nutrients or toxins through food chains, which has serious ramifications regarding the transportation of particulate nutrients or toxins through food chains in general. Think about it. If radiation from the soil makes it all the way into the wolves, what sort of chemicals are making it into your food and your body? Now, if you think that Pripyat Chernobyl couldn't be one-upped, Team Ukraine has completed this absolutely mind-blowing specter of completed work in Poltava. The shape of completion resembles a snaky, tendriling triangle type thing, spreading in 3 primary directions. One is its city center, this beautiful circular road design with an accompanying band of buildings nestling the nice, gooey, park-like center into its bosom with love and warmth. Another is the National Technical University, built and architecture manufactured in the early 1800s by Louis Charlemagne, and the school was used for all sorts of non-school things following the 1917 revolution. They describe this school as a construction institute prior to the 1989 revolution, and since Ukraine's independence, it's become a university with over 25 different focuses, mostly leaning towards real-life economics as opposed to the circle of jerking off that goes on at the typical university. And here's Poltava's massive amount of completed residential space. While most of these residences have been around since the city's authorities chose to celebrate the city's 1100th anniversary in 1999, the actual date of the first historical reference has Poltava's existence dated at 1174. Maybe it was marketing, but that wasn't the beginning, as they've unearthed ancient Paleolithic dwellings and Scythian remains within the city limits. But even within the last 1,000 years, Poltava's name was not Poltava, it was Letava, which, like so much of Eastern Europe, was completely decimated by the incoming Mongol invasion in the 13th century. You know one reason why the Mongol Empire with Genghis Khan was so effective? They just ride their horses, and instead of camping to eat, they would just cut into the horse and drink its blood, and then keep going. Fucking wild shit. Anyways, according to legend, after an assimilated army from the Letava assisted the Grand Ducal Lithuanian army in the Battle of Volska River, they helped Vytautas to escape death. So supposedly this led to Vytautas giving the city the name Poltava, where it is first recognized as such in historical records starting in 1430. Later, the city became the base of a group of Ukrainian Cossacks who used it as a stronghold during the Khmelnytsky Uprising, a Cossack rebellion fighting against the Polish domination of the area. Sometime after that, it became the center of an anti-government revolt against Ivan Vyhovsky. This place was just insane. It was ransacked by the Great Turkish War sometime later. This was not just a peaceful place to live most of the time throughout history. Not like anywhere else is much better. You have a third of all of Europe's population dying to the Black Plague, and what you might not have known was that the Black Plague kept coming back every century or so for another round of killing. It just never ends. Enjoy your iced latte, DoorDash from Starbucks. Speaking of DoorDash and Starbucks, here is Mariupol, recently host to the Russian invasion and is now held by Russian forces. Take a good long look, as this is Mariupol before the invasion, and the fighting here was so intense it was reported that 90% of Mariupol's residential buildings were heavily damaged or completely destroyed. The city was basically leveled, and much of what was built here that you see is the pre-war condition of the area in order to historically preserve what it looked like during Ukrainian independence. At the center of the town we have the Teatralna Plasha, and take a good look, because if you actually took a look at this structure and surrounding park in Google Maps, it's completely gone. All of the buildings are either completely demolished or heavily damaged. The big blue church you see nearby seems to be one of the only buildings left standing or was untouched. Team Ukraine and Minecraft have also begun on this residential area as well to preserve it against what's happened in reality. Here in this project, Team Ukraine keeps its original territory and continues to build it the way that it was. What I love about this project is its intervening power to preserve something from the inevitable destruction, change, or decay that will take place. We're capturing a snapshot in time, and while we're intentionally doing this for Ukraine in the present, eventually we'll be preserving a snapshot in time when it's all wiped out in World War III. So get your iced latte DoorDash from Starbucks while you can. This island is crazy. It's called Snake Island, and in 2022, the Russians attacked and gained control of the island from Ukraine, the Ukrainian response being bombardment until they retook it sometime later. Between 30 and 100 people are on the island at any given time, and was highly militarized until Romania took issue with it, and since is mainly used for scientific purposes, until the Russian-Ukrainian War. This island was sacred to the mythological character Achilles, and for centuries had a temple with a statue of the hero inside. The ruins of this temple was discovered by Russians in 1824, all traces being completely erased once they built a lighthouse on top of the ruins. What the f***? Guys, no, that was important. Naughty. Naughty boy. Such a Anyways, people have been coming to this island sacrificing animals to Achilles for centuries, reporting visions of the hero and hallucinations during the act. This island is just crazy. It was a strategic element in World War II. It's been owned by Ukraine, Romania, Russia, Soviet Union, and it looks awesome in Minecraft. What also looks awesome in Minecraft is this starting progress in Cherkasy that begins with this building I'm sure looks very important. I couldn't find much information about it, and I can't read Russian, but safe to say this is not the town square. This city in 2008, during Ukrainians' independence, removed Lenin's statue from its central square, not pictured in the progress here, which caused quite the controversy. But seeming as how there are enough statues of the guy on Earth, there's even one in Seattle, that we could change up the scenery at least this once. They've also begun progress on beautiful Lviv, the very colorful city center that survived the modern wars and conflicts largely unscathed and thus is on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Many films depicting Rome or Venice were actually shot here in Lviv, and it owes its architectural roots in Roman architecture to its founding as a settlement way back in the 5th century. They've got lots of bicycle lanes, red flag, and is a worldwide tourist destination, or at least was until the current war. Speaking of red flags, here's a very erect building. The Ratusha in Ivano-Frankivsk, a crafts, culture, and history museum at the heart of the city. Its modern Art Deco design is actually one of the many iterations of monuments or buildings that have stood here and served a similar purpose throughout much of history. During World War II, Nazis tried to blow up this building, but with it being reinforced concrete, they had trouble. They were able to blow up one wing of the structure before they were ran out of town. If you're looking for port towns, Berdyansk is a project recently started that is home to a number of water sport activities, museums, and even a safari zoo. But so far, Team Ukraine has managed to build the town square, which doesn't ordinarily look like this year-round. Merry Christmas. Speaking of town squares, this epic circular square exists in Kharkiv at the heart of the city. They call it Freedom Square, or named it such with the independence of Ukraine, as it obviously had many different names before that depending on which empire owned the city at the time. The 9,467th Lenin statue we've seen in Soviet towns is still here, but interestingly enough, 10 years ago, pro-Russia protesters and pro-Ukrainian activists went to war in this square over whether it should be torn down. Team Ukraine have also begun progress surrounding the mosque in Dnipro, the square and building of the state administration in Kherson, and an area of progress surrounding the statue of the Duke in Richelieu. In Odessa, Ukraine, the third largest city in the country with its roots in classical antiquity as a large Greek settlement. One thing you have to remember about what you've seen in Ukraine: this is built by native Ukrainians. Their entire lives are being turned upside down in this war, and despite all of that, they're still building it in Minecraft. The dedication is unmatched. My heart goes out to them and their families, and a huge thanks to their continued contributions to mapping the world in this game. A huge thanks to our top tier patrons, Solly and Third Edit Man. I'm at Yellowstone this week, and their contributions paid for the hot dogs, tent, survival gear, hockey mask, chainsaw, marshmallows, and camping chairs. Thank you.